I'm weird. I'm a weirdo. I don't fit in, and I don't want to fit in.
You know, I've seen a lot of movies I'd call weird and or strange, but every few years I stumble across a movie that is so bizarre, I'm left speechless and confused. This was the case when I watched the 2012 David Cronenberg film Cosmopolis, starring one Robert Pattinson. Based on the book with the same name, the synopsis sounds pretty intriguing. A 28-year-old billionaire is traveling across Manhattan in his limo in order to get a haircut, and on his journey, his world and wealth crumble before him. Well, at least that's what the description says. But what I actually watched was a fever dream, acid-induced, batshit crazy story about people who act like lunatics while talking as if they're in a play written in the 15th century. I don't even think I can use my normal format of telling you about the plot and then discussing the movie, because honestly, I don't even know how to do that. So as I go through the plot, I'll kind of just be sprinkling that in throughout, because there are a boatload of metaphors in this movie. So with that, let's get into it. Cosmopolis opens on Robert Pattinson saying he wants a haircut while referring to himself in the third person, which he does for this little opener and then never really again. This is how you instantly know this movie is going to be weird. The third person thing, and also just the way it looks. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but the green screen and overall look of this film is really cheap. So main billionaire guy is Eric Packer, and he's a big-time currency speculator, and some recent decisions have him concerned about his cybersecurity. At the same time, his security guard warns him about the traffic enclosures in Manhattan because the president is in town. Now, a majority of this plot takes place in Eric's limo, as we get these little segments of different people visiting him and having these conversations. And first up is a guy named Shiner, who constantly reassures Eric that the security is fine, while also asking him why they don't chat in the office. This is where we get our first taste for what's to come in this movie, as the two just speak back and forth in metaphors and in riddles.
Any special reason we're in the car instead of the office?
What makes you think we're in the car instead of the office?
If I answer that question,
Based on what premise?
you will pity me for having been born.
So after Shiner leaves, Eric spots his wife in a taxi, so he just casually gets out of his limo and hops in her taxi to force her to go to lunch with him. While they eat lunch, the weird train continues when he starts to compare his wife's chest to her mom's chest.
Ew! Dude! What the fuck?
And this is all while he berates and asks her over and over when they are finally gonna do the dirty deed. His wife then asks him what he does for a living, and she thinks his job is acquiring information and turning it into something stupendous or evil. So, you married this guy and you don't know what he does? Luckily, we don't spend that long talking about the weird comparison to body parts and the lack of sex that Eric is having, because we then jump to a conversation about rat currency. No, you heard me right. Rat currency. When Eric and Michael go back and forth about how stockpiling rats and trading them could be the future currency, they're really talking about how anything could become the future currency in the world if the 1% deemed it. And look, I love the message about fuck the 1%, but the way the movie talks about it is more confusing than anything. After that, Eric has sex with his art consultant, Dee Dee, in his limo, where she talks about how his wife is from one of the richest families, and together they make a rich, powerful couple. During this, Eric also continually asks her if he can buy this specific chapel, but she actually has a painting for him instead that's extremely rare. He declines the extremely rare painting because the chapel has 14 paintings, and he assures her that he has the space in his apartment to hang every single one of them up. Then Eric says he's losing many millions. Literally just like that, many millions. But his security guard pops in to say that things have gotten even worse. The security officer shows him a clip of a rich guy getting murdered on TV and warns Eric that the trip across town for a haircut is going to be dangerous and difficult, but Eric just says that he wants that haircut. This is all followed by a random guy holding up a rat to the window. Next up is Jane, who is Eric's chief of finance. And boy, this is where they turn the weird dial all the way up, baby. So Jane and Eric talk about how lives don't exist on the weekend because everyone dies and our real selves are when we are working, and everyone exists in the shadow of what they do. Then, out of nowhere, this doctor gets slammed up against the limo, and he's there to perform Eric's daily checkup. Eric gets this thorough, and I mean thorough, checkup every single day, no matter what and no matter where he is. And this includes a very sexually charged prostate exam that he gets while making very uncomfortable eye contact with Jane. The security guard comes back and says that there's flooding up ahead, the president's whereabouts are no longer known, and something about a satellite causing traffic and mass paralysis. They kind of just breeze past that last one. Like, how does a satellite cause mass paralysis? Can we elaborate on that even a little bit? We don't have time to elaborate on that though, because Eric heads to the bookstore where his wife is reading, and she casually brings up that he smells like sex. He tries in a very unconvincing way to say that it's the craving for sex that she smells. Then he forces her to go have lunch with him, even though she's not hungry. At lunch, he tells his wife that at 4 years old, he figured out how much he'd weigh on every planet in the solar system. For no reason, Eric then tells his wife in great detail how limos are made. He explains that his was made to be soundproof, but it doesn't work, and the noise that the city makes is the same noise it made in the 17th century. The conversation goes back to how they still haven't had sex, to which she tells him to be nicer to her. But before any more can be said, two guys with dead rats come running in, chant some stuff, and then throw the rats while they scurry off. Okay, I still don't fully get the next visitor in the limo, as his chief of theory rambles on about how people are scared of the future. Their weird conversation takes place while a mob of people vandalize and riot in the streets, which includes a big rat being slammed against the window. What's also funny about this is how after everything the chief of theory explains, she then says that she doesn't understand anything that she's talking about. Now, this is all meant to show how isolated the 1% are, as Eric is seemingly untouchable in his limo while the city is thrust into chaos on the outside.
The more visionary the idea, the more people it leaves behind. This is what the protest is all about.
Once again, the security guard interrupts to tell Eric that their security is compromised, but all Eric replies with is that he still wants that stupid fucking haircut. We then cut to Eric cheating on his wife some more with another one of his bodyguards. She doesn't say much, but she does pull out her taser, which prompts Eric to ask her to tase him before we cut away. After he cheated on his wife for the second time in one day, he spots his wife smoking, and when he questions her about it, she casually says that she has been smoking since she was 15, and it's what a girl does to be noticed. So he drags her to dinner now and tells her that his fortune is basically gone because he made so many bad decisions throughout the day that he lost most of it. She replies by saying that she knows about his affairs and that she'll help him financially, but as for their marriage, that's over and he can basically fuck off. Now, one of the other backdrops that's been happening during all of this is a funeral for a really famous rap artist. So another guy gets in the limo and Eric cries over the death with this other guy, which is our only real sense of humanity in this rich prick. Throughout the movie and all the terrible things and mistakes that Eric makes, we never see any real sense of guilt, ethics, or morals come through in the way he speaks or behaves. And it's interesting because this artist actually means something to Eric, as we learned earlier that he has 2 elevators at his apartment and both play different music from this rapper. So the only real sense of humanity is Eric mourning the death of an artist he loves while he continues to cheat on his wife, cheat people out of money, and be a terrible person, which I find really interesting and also way too accurate to real life. After that, the limo stops and a dude runs by and slams a pie into Eric's face. The guy then monologues for a minute about all the famous and rich people he's pied in his life before Eric kicks him in the gushers and the guy is hauled off. And all that happens while paparazzi surround them and take endless photos of the event. Once the pieing is over, Eric and his security guard walk over to watch two kids play basketball, and Eric asks to see his gun. The gun is voice activated, which would make sense if it was the Dread gun, but it's not. So Eric simply asks him to speak the code to turn the safety off. And I think the voice activated safety is interesting, but practically pretty fucking stupid. Oh, and then Eric just shoots the security guard in the head. Yeah, just bing bang boom. He throws the gun away and just walks away. Eric finally makes it to the barber shop, and the barber asks why he's been such a stranger lately and calls his hair ratty. The limo driver and the barber talk back and forth about how they both used to drive taxis and how they always ate at the wheel, followed by the barber talking about all the places he used to pee back in the day. Eric mentions that he had a gun but decided to throw it away, so the barber berates him about not keeping it, and he really lays into Eric about throwing away the gun. So he gives him a new gun so he can protect himself, and Eric says he needs to leave with only half a haircut. The driver and Eric stop at a place where the limos get washed and are stored every night, and then the driver just leaves Eric there. Paul Giamatti's Benno yells from the rooftops and takes shots at Eric in the street, so naturally, Eric fires wildly into the air back. Now this kicks off the final act of the movie, which is really just a conversation between Benno and Eric as they go back and forth about what legacy and living really means. Benno used to work for Eric, but was fired due to the insane requirements the job had, so now he wants to kill Eric so he can count for something in his life. During this, Benno shows him his outhouse that he cut a hole in his floor for, meaning his downstairs neighbors get daily deliveries from Benno's butt. Then Eric says that Benno doesn't hate the rich because nobody is against the rich since everyone is 10 seconds away from being the rich. No, that's not true. I think a lot of people hate the rich. For good reasons too. Now what happens next I actually kind of like. Eric is so disconnected from the world that he shoots himself in the hand because he doesn't believe the pain will be real. Like I said, this is a weird movie, but during all the weird back and forth, there are some really good moments that I want to mention. At one point, Eric questions Benno's masculinity by asking him questions about his gun and the attachments, to which Benno responds with, "I don't have the manhood to answer those questions." And during another point in the conversation, Benno says that he's been beaten down by capitalism so much that now all he can do is be a person. That's fucking relatable. And then the only moment these two connect over in the conversation is how they both have, asymmetrical prostates. So the only common ground these two men have is their physical bodies, which is just another way this movie highlights the disconnect between the rich and the poor. The weird train finally comes to an end when Benno says that he has to kill Eric so he can count for something in his life, and while he holds the gun to his head, the movie ends. So yeah, this is a movie that takes some really big swings and takes a lot of turns down Insanity Alley. I think it's interesting how while Eric is in his limo, he gets everything he wants. People answer him the way he wants, he gets the sex he wants, and he's 100% protected from the chaos outside that is a result of him. Also, the trailer for this movie paints a completely different movie. It says things like, destroy the past, control the future, while it plays epic music. I also noticed how they really cut around the crazy and insane dialogue by only taking small snippets here and there.
Do you ever get the feeling that you don't know what's going on? People eat and sleep in the shadow of what we do.
And that's because if they showed any more than that, you would get a full sense for the weird dialogue that's in this thing. I think if you're someone who enjoys the metaphors and the cryptic allegories, then you're really gonna enjoy this movie because it's definitely more for someone like that. But if you're an average moviegoer, then I don't think you're gonna have a very good time in this one. Everyone talks like they're in one of those Shakespeare plays where you kind of understand what they're saying, but you ultimately have to think harder than you want to in order to figure out what it all means. Or am I the only one that struggles with deciphering these metaphors? I did go to school in the South, so... The whole point of this movie is to show how isolated and disconnected from the rest of the world the 1% are, but at the end of the day, we already kind of know that. Have you seen what rich people do? They do weird shit. Lots and lots of weird shit. Some support groups that we've established as the bad guys all the way back in the 1940s when the world fought against them. And sometimes they take a poorly made submarine down to the Titanic and implode because they don't listen to the experts that said, hey, don't do that. What's most interesting about this movie is how relevant most of the themes and messages are in the mainstream today. But as much as this movie confused me, even on a second viewing, I can't help but find something to enjoy in all of the craziness. It makes Cosmopolis a hard movie to place. So I'm making a new category on this channel for movies that are exactly like this one. So the fever dream known as Cosmopolis is going into a new category called Just Plain Weird. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed this, don't forget to check out my video on 101 Dalmatians, a so bad it's good kind of movie. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment down below what movie you'd like to see me cover in the future.